Hello, DevOps people. How you doing? I'm Jochen. I'm going to do a bit of live coding today. Oh, it's a bit of a rough week. The kids are home from school. They are on Easter break, and if there wasn't enough chaos in the house, no, we also have my in-laws over visiting, and so lots of stuff happening, and I'm sleeping on a camping mat in the living room at the moment. So if I don't make the most freshest of impressions today, please bear with me. I'm doing my best to keep you awake and myself. All right. What am I going to do today? I have this handy dandy GitHub issue here that I'm using to track my agenda. Hey, Simon, nice to have you here. So, as I've mentioned in previous live streams, my company is running a web hosting platform, and we are finally going to integrate the hosting with logging platforms. So far, we have integrated a few external logging platforms, just like Elastics, and we are going to offer this as a service as well. So we not only have to set up some kind of Elasticsearch Kibana integration stuff, which I've already started, and I'm not sure. I think in one of my earliest live streams, I even built a bit of Docker infrastructure for that, and we'll get back to that in later streams. What I'm going to do today is the other side of the equation, namely our hosting platform. First of all, we need to generate the logs that our customers want to analyze. And second of all, we need to ship these logs to a, at this moment, fictional Elasticsearch or FluentD instance in that case. So I put two tasks on my agenda today. First of all, extend our Varnish cookbook to set up logging. We do have log files from our application servers too, but since we always run the Varnish reverse proxy in front of our application servers for much higher performance, the HTTP requests that reach our application servers are oftentimes only a small subset of the incoming requests, because ideally the majority of HTTP requests will be answered by Varnish and will never reach our application servers. So what I'm going to do is set up our Varnish Chef cookbook so that it actually writes logs. So far, our Varnishes normally don't write out logs because no one's interested in them. And that needs to change. And as soon as part one is done, I need to find a way to ship these logs to a EFK stack consisting of Elasticsearch, F for FluentD, and K for Kibana, the web frontend. So that needs an extension of the FluentD cookbook that I already touched in previous streams too. So we'll basically continue where I left off last time I worked on the FluentD cookbook. Before I get started, as always, if you have any questions, if something is not clear, if you have any requests, test me, send me a message on the chat, and I'll see what I can do about it. I'll respond as well as I can. Don't be shy. Simply pipe up in the chat, and we'll see what we can do about it. Okie dokie. So, what I'm always trying to do in this stream is to convey what I think are best practices. Of course, that's a very subjective thing, but this is my stream, so it's my rules, it's my best practices. And I think it's a good practice to start things with an actual issue. So I'm going to create a GitHub issue for the change I intend to do with our Varnish chef cookbook. So what I'm going to do is I'll go to our company repository. Hey there, Cicero, how you doing? Good to see ya. Welcome to the chat. Chef cookbooks. Yeah, I'm. If I start staring into my screen for seconds on end, simply send me a ping or something to wake me up again. This will be interesting today. Yeah, so I wanted to create an issue. Yeah, it's getting spring for a change. Temperatures are rising, and here in Ireland we have a bit more sun. Although, to be perfectly fair, the weather here on the east coast of Ireland is much better than its reputation. I really enjoy the weather here. Let's create a new issue. Build recipe to configure logging, and since it's about Varnish, I'll be a bit more precise. So there's two things with the Chef Cookbooks repository here. First of all, unfortunately, it's a private repository, so I won't be able to point you to it so you can watch along or fork things. We still have to establish some kind of workflow that allows us to take cookbooks that make sense in terms of making them open source and public, and then export them regularly, ideally in a kind of CI process so that things happen automatically. We are not there yet, but I'm definitely aiming for that. So you won't have the opportunity to look into the repository except here on the stream. It's not because things are so much secret, but many cookbooks are just don't make sense outside of our hosting platform, so doesn't make sense to publish them. And second, we have a monolithic repository. So what we do is we have a single repository for all our chef cookbooks. We tried and had single repositories for quite a while, for years basically, but I think it was last year or the year before we decided to collect everything into a single monolithic repository again, because we thought it would make things easier. Many changes are across multiple cookbooks, and being able to do them in a single commit or in a single pull request appeared appealing to us. And so far I think we didn't regret the decision to make it a monolithic repository again. So what we have to do is be a bit more precise and try and put a bit of context into our issue title. So in this case I'll explicitly mention Varnish here, and what we can do as well is add a label that actually makes it clear which chef cookbooks are affected by a change. In this case it's the Freestyle Varnish. No, it's Varnish Freestyle. Here we go. and it's a new feature because we'll be adding logging. I just read your messages. I knew I was familiar with your handle. Okay, you're actually based in Dublin, and we've met several times at Zendesk for the DevOps meetup. Yeah, I'm a bit tired, so hello, Cassiano. Needed to process that. No, actually, I tried the Atlas for a few minutes, but I just didn't find the time to put it into continuous use. So yeah, it still is here on the shelf beside me, and is waiting for me to give it some TLC. Okay, expected behavior. Well, I'll skip these. It's not exactly an issue. It's more of a goal. Add a recipe that sets up Varnish logging in an CSA format or something like that. Okay, now that we have an issue, we have an issue number, and that enables me to check out a new branch with that number, and I should have memorized it. It's 204. 204 Varnish logging, and we'll go here, and here we have the chef recipe for our Varnish setup. At the moment there's only a single recipe that does all the basic setup, that configures a configuration file, that configures the Varnish configuration language, the VCL file that determines how Varnish caching works, and that's basically it. So we want to have another recipe that we can use optionally to enable logging. Just as an aside, the most work is here in the templates directory, because we have a lot of different VCL files for different Varnish versions, and we'll have to consolidate that sometime in the future. Maybe that will be another live stream, but I don't know yet. For the time being, we'll tackle a more simple task, which is adding a new recipe. So I'll add recipes logging.rb, and we'll have to also add a test configuration that will also enable me to spin up a Linux container and look into that and see what's actually required to do logging. So that's another thing I've been thinking about. I'm going into these live streams more or less unprepared. I'll spend a bit of time thinking about what topics might be interesting to you, the viewers, and make sure that it won't get boring after 5 minutes, just like it happened a few episodes ago or a few sessions ago. But I won't do trial runs or things like that, because I'd like to have a very real feel about this live stream. I'd like people to see how it is to work as an sysadmin or an SRE, and well, making mistakes, going into dead ends and things like that, is just part of the game. And I don't mind if that happens on the stream, as long as it is, well, interesting and not boring, and is something you can learn from. We can all learn from. And so don't be confused if I change course midway or things like that. So in order to find out what logging in Varnish actually entails, I'll have to spin up a test infrastructure or a test server, and that will happen in the kitchen YAML file. Let's take a look. We have a kitchen YAML file. And it still is based on the Docker driver that sets up a Docker-based infrastructure. Recently, we have started to have YAML files for both Vagrant combined with VirtualBox, so a VM-based test system, and on the other hand, Docker as the driver for Test Kitchen to have quick Docker containers. The reason we take two ways here is that Docker, especially run on a Mac like mine, seem to cause problems with the chef run. So sometimes we just encounter the problem that at the beginning of the chef run, determining the actual versions of the cookbooks involved would take minutes, 5 minutes or more. And we haven't found out yet why that's the case. There are a few traces on the web about this, but nothing that's clear enough. Yeah, you're perfectly right. Docker for Mac is very nice. It's nice to use, and I like to use it. But it might have file system issues or something like that actually make the chef run initialization take minutes, and we can't have that, of course. If you want to run a quick test, it can't take minutes to even start. So on Linux, running it in Docker is not a problem, but especially my colleagues who run the tests mostly on their workstations, they prefer Vagrant more and more. I'm actually logged into one of our servers where I can work on native Linux, and the Docker driver here works perfectly well. And if you've seen previous episodes, you've seen that kitchen runs take no time at all. Since we seem to be leaning towards having Vagrant as our default configuration, I'll actually rename the kitchen YAML here into kitchen.docken.yaml. And I leave adding an actual kitchen YAML with Vagrant setup to one of my colleagues, so that we have consistent file naming here. What I'll have to do then is define kitchen.docken.yaml as my kitchen configuration. Sorry, which I do by setting this environment variable. Unix sockets can't be volume mounted. The ticket's been open for 2 years now. There's a workaround, but it requires socket or netcat. Well, yeah, that's not optimal, is it? I think it'll always be a problem running Docker on something that is not natively a Linux kernel. As much as I love the BSD base system of my Mac here, it's just not Linux. And Docker has been built for that. So you always need to have this intermediate VM, as lightweight as it might be. And things have to be transferred from the native macOS into this hyper something VM that we are using at the moment, and then into the Linux container. And this complexity always comes with issues. And here I really prefer running things as close to the metal as possible. And this machine here, Ops 06, is actually bare metal, so I have the whole machine at my disposal. It's not a VM or Amazon instance or something like that. There's a FreeBSD image that runs on FreeBSD Docker without a VM, but obviously you can't run any. Yeah, if you're based on if you're working on BSD, that might be nice, and would be an interesting thing. I've never worked on BSD. Back when I started one of my first businesses, I thought about actually buying NetBSD licenses to build my web hosting company, but that never materialized. And many years later, I started my current company, and we are obviously based on Ubuntu Linux. Okay, let's get back to work. Starting a test instance starts with creating a new test suite, which we are, I guess, basing on the FreeSteelBox suite here. There are more suites that we use to test special cases, quite a few. And I'll simply add my logging suite here, which runs the Apache recipe only for test purposes, of course, but in order to test Varnish, you need to have some kind of backend that Varnish can talk to, so we simply take an out-of-the-box Apache. We need curl to run tests to send HTTP requests, and then we'll use the actual default image, default recipe, and now I'll have to add my still to build logging recipe. In order for the tests to work, we need the default site in Apache be working. Normally you don't want to have that on a production machine, but for testing it's perfect. We'll use our FreeSteelBox configuration. Varnish will listen on port 81. And we'll talk to a backend on port 80, which of course is Apache in this case. So we don't need to reconfigure Apache to work on a different port. Okay, so we should be able to... did I save the logging recipe that is still empty? Yep. Okay, so we should be able to kitchen list. And we should be able to run a kitchen converge. By the way, Cassiano, how did you find my live stream? Was it my tweet? So, yeah, setting up the work image always takes a bit of time, but only for the first time. It might have to update the underlying base image. But once that's done, kitchen runs are usually pretty fast. Well, you can't say social media doesn't work, can you? Here we go. It does work for good and for bad. Yeah, you're right. To be honest, sending the tweets for the live stream were the reason that I got back to Twitter in the first place. I haven't been using it actively for quite a while, not even for reading, but it seemed to be an option, and it seemed to be an effective one. And yeah, it seems to at least work for a few people. Thanks for the hint. Actually, yeah, I still am not that familiar with the Twitch interface, and using my channel feed would make sense, since yeah, it's my channel, and simply checking the box to send it over Twitter does make sense and will make things a bit more efficient. Even though I'd like to schedule a few tweets in advance to make people aware that I'll be streaming tomorrow or something. Here we go. Apache is getting installed with lots of configuration files, for which I don't care much. Now it's installing curl because we need to need the curl command in our integration tests. Well, I do stream sometimes, but mostly games I don't think people would find interesting me working. You might be wrong. Obviously, there are people who have the time to watch other people work. Yeah, the idea to start this stream was basically that I started learning a lot from streams, to be honest, about gaming. I rediscovered, or I re-subscribed to World of Warcraft last year, found a very nice guild and started playing again, and actually started playing, getting into a bit of a competitive mode, so I had to up my game, and having streams really helped me get my gameplay improved. And I thought, why wouldn't I be able to do the same with work, basically, to help people, to share what I know, and to show how it is to do daily system engineering work. And I simply gave it a try, and since then I've gained quite a bit of a following, and I'm more than happy about that. Well, yeah, it depends on your employer if and what you are going to stream. In my case, I started this stream aiming at my own team, because we already did something like this internally, where I would do work and we'd do pair programming or something like that. And I thought, okay, it's not a good thing that everyone has to take out a certain time period out of their day to participate. So how about recording things? And then I thought, well, okay, obviously there are video conferencing tools like Zoom that allow recording, but how about using the same stuff that I enjoyed with gaming, and so platforms like Twitch can record as well. So part of my team is watching live, and others will watch the recording later. I'll post it to our internal Discord forum, and people will be able to watch it there and ask questions and stuff. Actually, I'm writing a blog post about that at the moment, and I hope to get it finished sometime after Easter. I stream my open source contributions. Well, good for you. Works out well as it keeps me focused and not on Hacker News, Facebook, Twitter. Yeah, definitely. Even having having a regular schedule is advised, of course, and for that to work, I have to think in advance what I'm going to do. So it keeps me in motion and doing things. I have a full stream equipment here, even with a 10-channel audio mixer with digital input from my video game, a Magewell capture card, Sennheiser microphone, preamp, everything. Yeah, I'm at risk of doing the same things. I already have a pretty expensive microphone here, and should I get into game streaming, I might spend quite a bit of money and throw it at Elgato or something like that. But fortunately, I'm not down that rabbit hole yet. So our test infrastructure is, our test container is ready. So I should be able to log in. And I have to set the Yama variable in this shell as well. Here we go. So we should already have a running Varnish. Yep. And now, what do we need to have logging? So I don't think we'll have to install additional packages, but we'll have to start additional services. There are two services that are relevant here. I think they're still in init.d. Yeah. So there is Varnish log, which sounds like the thing to go, but there's also Varnish NCSA, and that's actually what I'm aiming for. Varnish log will write a log in the native Varnish format, which has all the small details of the HTTP requests. That's not what I'm aiming at, because we'll want to allow analytics for our web hosting customers. So Varnish NCSA is actually the service I'm interested in, because it writes the typical access log that everyone knows from running Apache. So starting this service will actually get me halfway there, I guess. So we'll have a simple service resource, Varnish and CSA, and we'll have it do two actions, namely enable the service at bootup and start it. And just recently I've learned a new Ruby syntax that we can use %i to create a simple list of symbols. Elgato works fine. I prefer Magewell. It's better, but twice as expensive. Yeah, you can spend a fortune on that stuff. In my case, I think I'm probably limited to something like Elgato, so an external box or something, because I don't have a PC where I can add an additional card or something. But yeah, being a total nerd, it wouldn't be surprising if I bought another PC just for streaming purposes. I will hold myself back asking about Apache and Varnish, as you know my preferences. Yeah. Well, in that case, I just need to have something that responds to HTTP requests, so I could use anything, and just picking the Apache was out of historical preference, not out of ideological reasons. Oh, yeah, your Magewell is USB as well. Okay. Well, no, I won't have a look at that. Never. Let's see. Let's run another converge, and that should skip all the stuff that has already been installed. And simply go and start the logging service. And yes, it did enable Varnish and CSA, which it already was, interestingly. I didn't expect it to be enabled by default. And then it started the service. I wonder why it wasn't started at installation time, because the enable must have happened somewhere outside my recipe. That's interesting, and I don't think we have a Varnish NCSA running on all our machines at the moment. Anyway, now it is in the state that I'd like it to be in, so there should be a Varnish NCSA. No, it's not. Why is it not? If it says action start, what happens if we run service Varnish and CSA start? Well, if the service start actually doesn't work, that would explain why it is enabled but not running. So there is no indication that the service is actually starting. Let's take a look at varlog upstart. No. Varlog Varnish doesn't seem to contain any files. Oh, I think I know why. Because it has to be enabled in the default configuration. I'm pretty sure that in etc default Varnish and CSA, yeah, we'll have to write this file and actually set Varnish and CSA enabled to 1. Otherwise, the init script will run all the time, but it will do nothing. So, what I'm going to do is try and simply write this file, and we could even make it a node attribute, but that would be the second place where we would enable logging simply by running the recipe. We are already making it clear that we want to run logging, so I guess what we need to have is this state of the file. How can I get this into my recipe? kitchen doesn't have an SSH command, just a login command, right? And how does kitchen login work? Is it always an interactive login? How do I run something like cat in a kitchen instance so I can copy it on my host system here? Well, there must be a Docker container. In this case, it's this container here. Why wouldn't I be able to do docker exec? Yeah. And we'll write this to templates, default varnish and csa.erb. So what we do is create a template resource for etc default varnish and csa, and we'll use the default -varnish and csa.erb template. We'll create it and use, I guess, root as owner. It's root and with pretty normal permissions. Okay. So group root mode 0644. Anything else? No, we don't have any variables, so we should be good. So let's go back to this test instance, restore the previous state, and now let's run another converge. And this time we should have a running service, which I should immediately build an integration test for. I should have done this before if I would strictly follow TDD. So what I should do is create another integration test for the logging suite, and we'll just call it logging spec, I'd say, because another practice I do is name the integration test after the recipe we are testing. In this case we have a bit of redundancy because the test suite also is named logging, but I don't mind. We should be able to do something like service varnish and csa do it should be running. So it actually wrote the configuration file. In this case it should actually have started the service, which we should be able to verify. No tests executed. Tests from test integration logging. Test integration logging? That's exactly where I put my file, didn't I? Test integration logging, logging spec. Oh. Why you now run my test? Are we running in spec? Yes, we are. If you have a Docker configuration, it should be running in spec as a verifier. It's probably something pretty simple that escapes me completely because I'm not the fittest today. I had to add an empty default RB to have a correct tree. Well, we can simply try and rename it to test integration default spec.rb. No? Yeah, it did. Rename the file, right? Test integration default. No, not test integration. Move test integration default spec into test integration logging default spec.rb. Yep, no, there's a default. No tests executed. It might require starting up from scratch because it might do some parts of the test setup in the convergence phase, and we didn't have any integration tests for this suite when we started, so let's run a kitchen test logging something. And then if that works, I can rename the file again. Well, I could do this if I'm quick. Move test integration logging something into test integration logging log, or what's the name of our recipe actually? Logging.rb. I guess we should call it Varnish and CSA.rb. That would make things a bit clearer, because logging could be a Varnish type log as well. Let's be precise, people. Let's be precise. So it's not even in Git at the moment, so I could just move recipes logging RP. Oh no, we'll simply use this Varnish and CSA.rb. Good. And then we can actually move this into test. Oops. Test integration logging. That's the test suite. That's perfectly okay for the time being, at least. And we'll call it Varnish and CSA spec.rb. Failed to rename because I did something with it already, haven't I? Test integration logging default spec into test integration logging Varnish and CSA spec.rb. So we might be better off closing these files and opening them up again, but at least. Yeah, I see what you tried there, Simon. You don't need the inspec subdirectory because if inspec is the default verifier, it'll take it, and you don't need to name the test tool. If you are using server spec or bats or something else, you'll have to have a correctly named subdirectory there. But since Chef uses inspec by default, they don't require you having a subdirectory named inspec in the first place. Okay, looks like I'm not going to tackle the second part because we are already running almost for an hour now. Now, what's broken? Yeah, of course. What's broken is that I'm referencing a non-existent recipe. Varnish and CSA. Yeah. Having an empty default spec is something I would only do as a last resort. From my understanding, Test Kitchen will always take every file that matches the pattern *_ spec.rp and execute them, probably in alphabetical order or directory order, something like that. So you shouldn't really have to have a default _spec because anything _spec should work. And either I'm completely wrong in that understanding, or I insist of things working that way. And so I'd take it as a workaround, but I'd find it quite confusing having an empty file there, because I wouldn't know, okay, is this empty on purpose, or has someone just saved an empty file by accident, or should there be some test in there or not? So I hope I'll get by without having an empty default spec. FIFAs are not really a file, just a pointer. They are basically part of the kernel, and you won't be able to share stuff that is part of the kernel context over a network file system or any other kind of file system. Okay, installing Varnish. least effort in the situation, definitely. I can very much relate to that. Even on this stream, I had issues with some completely from a completely unexpected direction, and I had to work around it in some way because I simply didn't want to spend time on this completely unrelated thing. So I know where you're coming from. So basically, I don't think Docker can solve this, at least not easily. No, I don't think they will be able to solve this, and that's exactly why I decided to not work on my machine here, even though it's pretty powerful, and simply use SSH, or in this case Mosh, to log into one of our servers, into one of our Linux servers, and work there. We are running Linux in production, so why not develop on Linux? And since I'm using Vim and everything else is terminal based, I'm working with for development, I don't have any problem to do that. And it's even not a side effect, it's actually quite a benefit to me. I can even develop on from my iPad. So I can sit in Starbucks and open up a shell and start logging into tmux and resume my work where I left it off. Okay, Varnish and CSA is running. Let's verify that it's actually working. Now we'll see if it's actually executing the test. Oh, come on. Do I really have to have a default spec? You must be kidding me. Test integration logging default spec.rb. Hipster DevOps kit? Come on! It's being productive on the move. Another verify. If it works now, I'd be severely disappointed. Okay. At least that's not the case, but now I still have to solve the problem that it's not executing any tests. Why? Why? Well, of course it's acceptable on a beach, but even it's even accepted on not vacation days. What am I doing wrong? It's something that I'll slap my hat later about, is it? Varnish first in test integration logging. Version not specified, should not be specified. Target Docker something, no tests executed. If there aren't 2 Bluetooth devices active at a time, well, yeah, 2 Bluetooth devices and at least 5 tethering hotspots. See, it's always these simple things. It's not building perfectly structured code, it's simply getting your code to run. That is the problem in the end. Let's have a look at the kitchen file again. We are running logging, attributes, Varnish, something, something, something. And here we have verifier in spec. We're running it on Ubuntu 14. We should run tests on 16 as well, but that's outside of my current scope. Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't work all the time. It even has the Latin version for the more sophisticated people. It says subsiste sermonem statim. Well, it should be obvious to you, I guess, because it should be closely related to Italian. Now, yeah, come for the remote work, stay for the hostile work environment. You don't seem to enjoy working in Starbucks. I wonder if it's more you being hostile to the work environment, because I seem to be working quite fine there. Let's get back and focus on this stuff here. Do you use data bags with Docker? Yeah, I do. I was reading here the docs and didn't see any mention about data bag support. Yes, it does. It transfers data bag, test data bag contents into the container, so that the chef 0 that's running in the container can load them and provide them. That works quite well. The only thing you need to have is you go into your Docker file and where I think here for the provisioner you simply add data bags path, I think, and then test integration data bags, and then you can put your data bag items under there. I don't get it. It says it loads stuff from test integration logging, and that's exactly where I have my stuff. Let's do a more brute force approach and see if it actually makes things fail. Yes, it does. So, actually, I have an error in my test here. Oh, I know. Or not. Let's see. Package. Varnish. We can even steal something from an existing test here. But that's exactly the same thing that I have. Let's see if it should be installed. I have the suspicion that it's the service resource or the service test that doesn't work, but no, it's not. How do things look under test integration, say Drupal? There's just a default spec. Oh, thank you, Cassiano. It's probably the describe. Yeah, of course. So it's no, is it? These are the things that are confusing in all these RSpec derivatives. They work similarly, but not identically. Yeah, it's describe something and then it. Of course. So it's not service do, it's describe service do. So I simply didn't describe any tests, so I didn't execute any. I knew it was simple. It's always that stuff. Yes, of course it does. Brilliant. So, let's run a final test. Do I get stars on my book? Well, first of all, I would have to start a book. And I don't think I'm starting to manage a streaming book, but you can come back at a later time. I'm very generous today. You'll be re-invited to the stream. You're very welcome, Cassiano. I'm very happy to have people on my stream that I actually know in real life. I'm happy to have a lot of other people here as well, don't get me wrong. Maybe I'll even do a talk at our DevOps meetup in Dublin about live streaming my work. But I'll have to have the blog post finished first. I did a lot of talking today because setting up such a simple recipe and such a simple test shouldn't have taken me an hour. But at least I've made a first step towards our central logging infrastructure. Actually, this would be a really nice topic. Do you think so? I'd be happy to talk about it. This is my 12th session or something like that. I'll have to count them. So I guess there is a bit I can talk about from my point of view, and I'd be happy to. Sharing the tools, yeah, that's actually a good idea. Just to get people interested in, and so that people can see that it's not too hard to set up. Just take a peek behind the curtains. Yeah, makes sense. I just have a feeling that YouTube Live for this kind of content is better than Twitch. Yeah, I actually have been thinking about moving to YouTube, but since I recently discovered this awesome streamers list on GitHub, where you have a list of live people that do some kind of live coding, I went through the list and saw that almost everyone, with maybe 2 or 3 exceptions, were streaming on Twitch. So I thought, well, there must be a reason. And I discarded the idea of moving to another platform. Thanks for the hint at restream.io, though, because I was always wondering how people did stream to different platforms at the same time, because OBS doesn't allow that. So I knew that a few streamers were streaming to Twitch and YouTube at the same time, and I didn't know how they did it. So okay, what I did was to use Nginx. You stream to Nginx, and then you divide the stream to both YouTube and Twitch. So they actually use the same underlying protocol, apart from HTTP, obviously. But okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that you can simply take your stream and duplicate it to another streaming service. But yeah, I have never looked at the technical details. I just set up OBS and started streaming. Was happy that I didn't have to investigate so much. Okay, so at least we have a running service. Since I'm running out of time, I won't go into the second part of what I had planned, namely the FluentD setup that takes the log file and then ships it to an EFK stack. But I'd like to see if even without any requests there is automatically a log. For that I have to log in. Log Varnish. There isn't even a Varnish? No, I wasn't able to log in. Why wasn't... Oh, I ran test, and test automatically tears down everything if the test is successful, so I have to run another converge. And in the meantime, I'll clean up stuff here. I'll save everything. So now we have... okay, good. So we make 2 commits. I'll first add the kitchen.docken.yaml file. Put docken config into .kitchen.docken.yaml to be consistent across our cookbooks. And now we have the actual change. Add Varnish and CSA recipe. This recipe sets up Varnish and CSA logging. References resolves issue number 204. I thought about it. I'm just catching up on the stream. It's the same, RTMP. Okay, RTMP is the protocol behind it. Okay, I'll have a look at it. Closest number 204. Yep, I thought about it. So, but thanks for the hint. That should be it. Let's push our stuff. That way, if we lose this machine, we won't lose my work, my valuable work. Okay, it still hasn't stopped. It hasn't finished converging. We'll have to wait for that. By the way, that's actually why I have set up this commit template. It's probably in my home under git commit template. So with these 4 headings, why is this change necessary? How does it address the issue? What side effects does this change have? And references, because exactly it makes you think a bit about your commit message and how to explain to people what this commit actually does and why it does it. That's the more important part. And the references section at the end not only allows you to add, for example, links to some kind of documentation or web article that explains it, or a security notice or things like that. It also allows you to reference a GitHub issue and say, okay, it fixes this issue or it resolves this issue. Okay, we are almost done, I guess. It's just installing the Varnish apps repository. Now it can install Varnish itself. Just another minute, I guess. Well, okay, I wasn't as productive as I hoped to be today, but at least it was a very nice session about building chef code. I could have even done real TDD by first creating the integration test, having it fail, and then build the recipe to satisfy the test and make it succeed. But even in the order I chose, I think it makes sense and shows how to go about doing the basic stuff in Chef. As always, if you have any questions, simply go to GitHub. You'll find the URL at the bottom of the screen, and leave a comment under the agenda issue I've created there. So let's see, it's GitHub/gvis/devops with a 0, and then you'll find the today's agenda item. You can either add comments there if you'd like, or if you have any suggestions or stuff that is not directly directly related to this episode, you can create another issue if you like. Feel free to use the repository as you see fit, and I'll be able to respond there, and we can get into another conversation. Okay, here we go. Converge was successful. Let's do a quick verify again. Yep, logging service is running. Now I'll be able to log in. And let me see. Yes, there is already a Varnish NCSA log, but it's probably empty. Yeah, of course. We could do a curl localhost 81 and since it's port 81, I'm talking to Varnish here. Varnish automatically passes the request onto Apache and we'll get the default Apache welcome page back. And now I should have a log entry. That's okay for now. We could even try and build a test that actually does this, that executes a web request, and then we should see this web request in the log. I might be doing that later or on Thursday. I'll still have to decide if I'll continue this on Thursday. I probably will. It makes sense to simply finish up these agenda items, and I hope I'll be a bit more productive, and you'll see a bit more than today. But in any case, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.